This is Matt Gifford from HawkHillHardwood.com, sitting here with St. Joseph's head coach Phil Martelli, and hoping to give the viewers today some insight into the season past and the season coming. Thanks for sitting down, Phil.
Matt, it's good to see you. Let's get through this. Let's get through this interview. No injuries.
No,
that would be a big deal.
Well, I'm sitting. I hope I can't hurt myself. We'll see. So speaking of the injuries, Phil, I felt it would be a little bit of a disservice to jump right into things and start talking about the coming season without reflecting a little bit on the year that passed. And it was a season that saw a number of injuries, a number of close losses, and an 11-20 season. So the question that I had for you is, how do you use a season like this, a season that had some adversity, and how do you flip that and turn what was a negative for a couple months there into something that, not just for you and the coaching staff, but for the returning players, is something that you can build off of and learn from?
Well, I'm not a big believer that you learn from losing. I think you really do learn from winning and having a positive experience. And when people will say, well, Chris Clover got a lot of minutes. Yeah, but he got a lot of minutes in a losing season, or Charlie Brown's minutes. So what I really am focused on is the lessons that come from individual games. So there are games, the St. Louis game, we can't lose that game. We can't lose to Fordham here. And I'm not saying the quality of opponent. I'm saying the situation in the game at UMass. So what is it that we've picked up? And we've really broken down the tape. We're going to show the tape to them as we finish our spring workouts. And whether it's foul shooting that has to improve, whether it's confidence level, which I think is a big deal. We have to improve our confidence level. And we cannot just forgive.
Okay.
And we can't forget. You know, we could say, okay, this is why it happened, but good teams don't make excuses. Winning teams don't make excuses. So we're not making excuses. We lost guys and we didn't have the practice time, or any of those number of things, and guys were in roles that they would have never anticipated starting in September. But what we have to glean from it is that winning supersedes everything else. There's nothing that it doesn't replace it for the players, doesn't replace it for their families. Playing doesn't replace it for the fans, youth, excuses, none of that. It's about winning and getting zeroed in on what that feels like and never taking it for granted.
Okay. So you have a lot of players, obviously, that are coming back next year, a number of whom, between James at the beginning of the season, Shavar for most of the season, and Fresh for the end of the season, that missed time. But your roster is going to look a lot different next year with a combination of guys coming in and then also guys coming back. So I kind of was thinking specifically about the front court that you have next year, and ideally having both Checo and Lorenzo Edwards coming back, both guys that missed essentially the entire year. Also bringing in two freshmen in Anthony Longpre and Taylor Funk. How do you use this summer, the time that you're allowed to work with them, to incorporate essentially 4 new bodies into those positions?
That's a great question, because we've been a little bit hamstrung with the spring workouts. We've just concentrated on shooting. We've concentrated on rehab for 4 guys. You do exactly what the rehab staff is telling you. You do exactly what the strength and conditioning staff is telling you. When they allow you to come back out and shoot, which Checo is now doing, Lorenzo is doing, and Fresh is now doing. Okay. But you're not going to be banging any bodies. You're not going to be running around playing 2-on-2 or 3-on-3, and don't do it in your off time, because this is now a progress. I want to be making progress, so in June we're starting with most of our group. We won't have Shavar at that point, but we'll have most of our group intact, and we can start to piece those things together. You make a great point. Really, Lorenzo is new. Checo, it's hard to remember his game, because he was such a complimentary piece on a great team, a championship team. So Checo, to me, has to be a new player. He has to be a guy that has experiences, winning experiences, but he really is a new player. And Taylor and Anthony, and then you throw in Jai and Markel, that's your front court. James has to go back to being the wing that he was his freshman and sophomore year. James is an example. 44% of his baskets his sophomore year were fast break or offensive rebounds. 44%.
Okay.
Last year, 21%, because he had to play from a different part on the court. So he's not a forward. He will not be a forward, knock on wood, but he'll go back to the wing. So that's another new position that we have to look at and say, okay, well, now you have up there, you have Chris Clover and Charlie Brown and Fresh. So there's depth, there's going to be competition, but it has to start forming in June when we see, will Taylor's funk feet get in the way his freshman year?
Okay.
A lot of freshmen can't guard their freshman year. Is Anthony going to be all right? He is a skilled player, so he's going to be away from the basket, but he's going to have to turn around and guard. And when you look around and say, well, the guy you're guarding looks like Mo Alley Cox. How do we start to prepare that? So in June we'll pick it up. We won't do a lot of team offensive patterns, but we're going to look at where do we fit defensively and what skills fit with what guys. So if I'm a fan, and I know people debate all kinds of things all the time in the off season, they're looking for all kinds of conversation. The conversation would be wondering who plays with whom, as opposed to like where does that fit together? So, like I would start the conversation and say, well, Jai and Markel can't play together.
Okay.
That it's just not enough skill. Okay, so well, there's competition there. Or could they start? Could they come in the game? Where do they come in the game? What do they change? Should we play differently? Should we play faster because of Markel's athletic ability and really Jai's ability to score in the low post? We haven't had a lot of that, but Jai does have that ability. And then those other four, they're not playing for one position.
Right,
So
they're playing for a couple.
Right,
Now that you can
right.
kind of switch some of those front court guys back to the wing.
Right. So that's an interesting, and that's exciting. We'll start our workouts right away. The freshmen will get here around July 1st, and we will start working out Mondays and Tuesdays through the second week in August with them to get a feel for, that's going to be the biggest thing. Who fits with whom and who guards in this league.
Okay. So a moment ago when you were talking about James, you threw two percentages out there. You went 44%, and then I think it was 21%. You've been coach at St. Joe's for over 2 decades, and a lot has changed, obviously, in that time, both here through college basketball, through the NBA. A huge area of change has been in the technology and the opportunity to break down statistics. And you just threw a couple percentages out. How has your approach toward that side of basketball kind of developed over the last, let's say, decade?
Well, the biggest thing, Matt, is that it's helped me in scouting because Frank Deal will give me numbers about teams, and we kind of concentrate on the last 5 games that a team has played. What do their numbers tell me, and how can we incorporate that in the way that we play? We're still a work in progress in terms of how does it influence how an individual player performs. But we do share the numbers with a player. So plus like Charlie Brown was magnificent. But the fact is that Charlie Brown's been told he had the lowest plus minus on the team.
Okay.
Now, he played the most minutes.
Right.
And he played on a team where the puzzle pieces didn't fit together, and yet he was a perfect puzzle piece. So I don't use that to motivate him. I don't mean it to chastise him. I don't mean it to tamper down anybody that says, do you think he could be the next one? And I do. But I use those numbers to say to players, look, this is the way that it mapped out. So we do the plus minuses and combinations in lineups, and people will find it ironic, but the guys that fit the most and gave us the most production offensively was when Brendan and Javon were on the court together. Yet, I, as a coach, couldn't say, man, yeah, that feels right as a lineup. I get it. So that's still a work. We're still working to identify for the players. But for opponents and scouting, it's been great.
Okay.
And we're working now, to be honest with you, we're working now as I try to fill Sully's spot and things like that. We're working now with the administration to make sure that Frank we have a department that is analytically driven, and it could be for men's and women's basketball. That's what we're working on. We're not there yet, but that's what we're working on.
Yeah, I think that's something people probably want to hear because, I mean, just following over the maybe 10 years that I've been more closely related to it, just seeing the change in that field is pretty remarkable.
It's just it just really is extraordinary, and
it's across all sports too.
It goes
to with baseball and really, it's crossing all sports.
At the next level, though, because I've reached out to get a feel for Charlie and really looking at it, playing 2-point guards. So what teams in the league are doing that in the NBA, and what are they coming away with? Are they percentage points better offensively because of it? So it's really interesting, like the numeric breakdown. Like Charlie Brown at the next level right now is a number. He's not a name.
Right.
They have numbers on right corner shooting and left corner shooting and late game shooting, and they've shared that with me, and I'm going to use that to grow his game so that he is ready.
Okay, very interesting. So we talked a little bit about last season, about some of the analytics side of things. What is your schedule for this coming season looking like? I know last year when we talked about the formation of a schedule, but for people maybe that either forget that or are thinking about this season, where are you with your out-of-conference?
Yeah, I'm pretty close to done. We have one game left to get. That'll be a home game. We're going to play at Toledo to open the season. We're going to play Bucknell here on Wednesday night, and I don't know the date. It might be the 15th. That's an NCAA team with everybody back.
Okay.
On that Saturday, we're going to play Princeton.
And that's a return game?
That's going to be the start of 2 more years.
Got it.
So we had a gentleman's agreement to do 4 years if we both felt it was advantageous. I like the fact that it's a road game that we can get people to.
Yeah.
So I like the game, and I like the style because we see that style with Richmond. And they're honorable people. Like scheduling with them is you make a phone call.
You can make a gentleman's agreement. It actually works.
Right. Then we're going to take a break, and we're going to go to the Wooden Classic. And I'm not as well versed on the teams. I know DePaul is in there because of Kevin Edwards and Lorenzo Edwards. Having talked about that, I know San Diego State is in there. I believe St. Mary's is in there.
Okay.
And that'll be a high level. So we'll probably go in there maybe like as a 6 seed.
Okay.
But the Wooden Classic, we come home from the Wooden Classic, and in the middle of that week is going to be Temple at Temple, followed by Villanova here Saturday, December 6th, I think, if it's that Saturday. Then we're going to we have a home game to get either the 9th or the 12th. So the 9th would be the middle of the would be a weekend, I think, and then the 12th would be reading day. So we're trying to get a game in there.
Got it.
We would then take our break for exams. We're going to come out of exams, and we're going to play St. John's.
Really?
In the Hall of Fame Classic. I believe the game's being played at the Mohegan Sun. That's December 20th. And right before the Mohegan Sun, when we finish exams, we're going to pay Maine to come in here and play.
Okay.
We have a game to get, and then speaking of ironies, I've been really running and ripping with recruiting 2018s, but I got, in the past couple days, I got a call that Penn, we have the wrong date for Penn.
Okay.
They've moved it. Penn will now be later in January, still on a Saturday, still at the Palestra, the 27th. We have one more game to get, and I'm working with a number of what I think are interesting teams, right number teams.
Okay.
And all this is all this scheduling is numeric. The biggest number that I wanted, though, was I wanted 15 home games for our fans for next year.